The moment didn't arrive with warning signs. There was no teaser campaign, no carefully staged rollout, no countdown clock ticking away on social media to build anticipation. There wasn't even a whisper of a release strategy. Instead, the drop came suddenly, sharp, deliberate, and unannounced. And when it hit, the digital world didn't react in the usual chaotic way. For a brief stretch, everything seemed to pause. Feeds stalled. Conversations froze. It was as if people needed a few seconds to process what they had just heard before the inevitable explosion of reactions followed. Because this wasn't just another online rant or a vague attempt at stirring attention. It wasn't a cryptic post designed to spark speculation or send fans into detective mode. What landed was something far more direct, a calculated, lyrical strike that felt intentional from the very first bar. The kind of track where listeners didn't need clues or breakdown threads to figure out who was being addressed. The targets felt obvious, almost immediately. And according to the chatter swirling around the situation, that clarity was no accident. At the center of it all stands Remy Ma, a name that carries weight far beyond trending headlines. Her reputation wasn't built overnight, and it certainly wasn't built on half measures. From her early days with Terror Squad alongside Fat Joe, to massive records like Lean Back and the unforgettable cultural moment created by Shether, she has consistently demonstrated a willingness to step into conflict with precision rather than chaos. That history matters here, because it shapes how this latest move is being interpreted. This isn't someone known for random outbursts. When she speaks, especially on record, people assume there's intention behind every word. Opposite her in this unfolding situation is Claressa Shields, a dominant force in the boxing world, and a two-time Olympic gold medalist whose athletic legacy is firmly established. For years, her public image has been tied to discipline, strength, and dominance inside the ring. But in recent months, according to online conversations and commentary, her presence in this particular drama has taken on a different tone. Social media appearances, outspoken responses, and continued engagement in the situation have created what some observers describe as a noticeable shift in how she's being perceived. And then there's Papoose, a figure whose public persona has long been rooted in loyalty, composure, and consistency. For many, he represented stability, a contrast to the volatility often associated with celebrity relationships. But within this narrative, his role is being discussed in far more complicated terms. The speculation isn't centered on what's been said publicly, but rather on what might have been happening behind the scenes. According to the ongoing chatter, the situation didn't escalate overnight. There are claims, unverified but widely circulated, that efforts were made to handle tensions privately before anything reached this level. The idea being pushed is that there were attempts to de-escalate, to quiet things down, and to avoid turning personal conflict into public spectacle. But as the narrative goes, those efforts didn't hold. The drama continued to grow, fueled by online exchanges, commentary, and a steady stream of attention that refused to fade. That's where the shift allegedly happened. Instead of continuing to engage through indirect channels, the decision was made to respond in a format that carries permanence. Music. A record. Something that couldn't be edited after the fact or reframed through screenshots and second-hand interpretations. Once it's out, and it belongs to the audience as much as it does to the artist. What makes this moment stand out isn't just the existence of the track, but the timing surrounding it. Around the same period, various interview clips began circulating online, particularly from platforms like Vlad TV, featuring moments that viewers quickly began dissecting. Expressions, reactions, and offhand comments were analyzed frame by frame, with audiences trying to reconcile what they were seeing with the broader narrative already unfolding. One clip in particular became a focal point. In it, a reaction, described by many as more than just casual amusement, sparked immediate debate. Was it harmless? Was it revealing? Did it contradict previous statements or reinforce existing suspicions? The answers depended largely on who you asked, but the effect was undeniable. It added another layer to an already complicated story. Then came direct questions during interviews. Questions about living arrangements, about relationships, about the nature of connections that had been heavily discussed online. The responses, short and firm, were meant to close the door on speculation. But instead of ending the conversation, they seemed to intensify it. Audiences began comparing statements with social media activity, looking for inconsistencies or confirmations in places where none were explicitly given. All of this created the perfect storm into which the track was released. And that's where the idea of timing becomes central to how this moment is being interpreted. Some believe the surrounding events built a narrative framework, and the record arrived at precisely the point where it could have maximum impact. Whether that was intentional or coincidental is still being debated, but the effect remains the same: everything connected. Within the lyrics themselves, listeners have pointed to specific lines that feel less like general commentary and more like direct observations. References to behavior, patterns, and dynamics that, according to fans, align closely with what has been publicly visible over time. One particular theme that has sparked discussion is the idea of imitation, of someone adopting another's style, presence, or identity in a way that goes beyond admiration. This interpretation gained traction when a separate piece of content began circulating, a training video that quickly became part of the conversation. Viewers drew connections between what they were seeing and what they had heard in the track, reinforcing the belief that the lyrics weren't abstract. They were rooted in something tangible. Still, it's important to recognize that much of what's being discussed exists in the realm of interpretation. The language surrounding the situation is filled with allegedly for a reason. There are no official confirmations tying every claim together. What exists instead is a combination of public content, audience reaction, and the narratives that emerge when those two elements collide. What can be confirmed is the impact. The track didn't just circulate, it climbed. It gained traction quickly, securing a high position on digital charts and dominating online conversation. That kind of response doesn't happen in a vacuum. It reflects both the strength of the record itself and the level of attention surrounding the situation it addresses. Meanwhile, reactions, or the absence of them, have become part of the story. Silence, in moments like this, is rarely interpreted as neutral. For some, it's seen as strategic. For others, it's viewed as telling. The lack of immediate public response from certain individuals has only added to the speculation, with observers reading into what hasn't been said just as much as what has. Behind the scenes, there are also discussions about image and reputation. In an industry where perception can influence opportunity, prolonged controversy carries real consequences. Endorsements, partnerships, and public support are all shaped by how narratives unfold. If the chatter is to be believed, managing that perception has become a priority for those involved. For Remy Ma, the move is being framed by supporters as a form of control, an attempt to reclaim the narrative and present her perspective in a way that can't be filtered through intermediaries. Rather than relying on posts, interviews, or third-party commentary, she chose a medium where her voice is central and unaltered. For Claressa Shields, the situation presents a different kind of challenge. Navigating a controversy that exists largely outside her primary field requires a different strategy than handling competition in the ring. The skills that define athletic success don't always translate directly to managing public narratives, especially when those narratives are fueled by entertainment media. And for Papoose, the conversation revolves around consistency between public statements and perceived private actions. Whether those perceptions are accurate or not, they shape how audiences interpret everything that follows. In the end, what we're witnessing isn't just a dispute between individuals. It's a case study in how modern celebrity conflicts unfold. Music, interviews, social media, and audience interpretation all intertwine, creating a narrative that evolves in real time. There's no single source of truth, only overlapping perspectives, each competing for credibility. What happens next will depend on choices. Whether there are responses, clarifications, or further escalations remains to be seen. But one thing is certain: the moment the track dropped, the dynamic changed. The conversation shifted from speculation to statement, from scattered commentary to something more focused and deliberate. And in a landscape where attention moves quickly and narratives change even faster, creating a moment that holds people's focus, even briefly, is no small feat.